Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran suing Universal Music Group because you lost your masters in a studio fire on their lot, or else a scrappy upstart, furious that the engineer on your last session accidentally deleted all your files from Dropbox, this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the second Friday of July 2020. I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Philippe who would get mad if you called him Phil, and who drove a Honda Elantra with a 7 Dust bumper sticker on it, and who smoked a clove-flavored vape stick, and Philippe would charge you about $1,000 for a website that was obsolete in 6 months. That was garbage, but it's the future now, you guys. We don't have to work with Philippe anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians from around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. Everything you need is there. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, social media integrations. You can crowdfund commission-free there. You can do fan subscriptions commission-free there. It's a wonderful service. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go there and try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear my music live in the coming months, come watch The Song Show. Every Sunday night over on YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing The Song Show. You just go to YouTube, subscribe to my channel, and you'll get a reminder when it goes live. This week I'll be celebrating the songs of Tom Petty. I'll also be joined by special guest Michaela Ann, a former guest of the podcast. She'll play a song or two. And then I'm going to take questions and requests from you guys in the live chat. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do. You could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, that would help immensely. If you're not in a place where you can contribute financially, I get that. I've been there. There's still a couple ways that you can help for free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could just tell a friend that you think might dig the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. Over a decade ago, when I was a scrappy upstart, Wylie Hubbard welcomed me onto his radio show in San Marcos, Texas, and I've remained friends with him ever since. We've wanted to get him on the podcast for years, and I'm really glad that it's happening now at a very exciting part of his journey. I hope you dig it. As one of the fathers of the progressive country music movement of the 1970s, Wylie Hubbard has been pushing the creative envelope for singer-songwriters for about 50 years now. He cut his teeth in the Texas folk music scene alongside Jerry Jeff Walker and Michael Martin Murphey. When Walker recorded his tongue-in-cheek song Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother to much acclaim, Ray began drawing interest from major labels and ended up penning a deal with Warner Brothers. After departing that label due to creative differences, he spent the next decade or so making his living playing Texas bars and honky-tonks. He re-emerged on the national scene in the early 1990s with a string of critically acclaimed recorded works that continues until today. As you'll hear in this interview, it's also Ray's quick wit and charm offstage that's led to his legend. Before his debut at the Ryman Auditorium, the mother church of country, he remarked, "I'm going to try and leave a stain." Also, once when a child who was a fan of his came up and said, "Mr. Hubbard, I'm going to be a songwriter when I grow up," Ray famously retorted, "Well, you can't do both." His songs have been covered by Eric Church, Hayes Carll, Bobby Bare, and the aforementioned Jerry Jeff Walker. Pop Matters has dubbed him an iconoclast of the highest order. Rolling Stone has called him the Texas music wildcard, and NPR's Mountain Stage refers to him as an outlaw poet. As you're about to hear, all of those descriptions stick. His new album is entitled Co-Starring, and it's out today on Big Machine Records, featuring performances by Ringo Starr, Joe Walsh, the Black Crowes' Chris Robinson, and many others. Ray is riding out the pandemic at his home in Wimberley, Texas, and he was kind enough to jump on the phone with me this week to talk about his journey so far. Ray Wylie Hubbard, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You grew up, you were born in Okie. You got to Texas as soon as you could, I guess, as they say.
Yeah.
And then you were playing music in a folk scene in New Mexico. Can you talk to me about how you got your start? What did that folk scene look like in New Mexico, and how did you get there?
Well, I started in high school. I went to high school there in Oak Cliff at W.H. Adamson. And when I was a sophomore, Michael Murphy, who is now Michael Martin Murphy, was a senior. And he played at this assembly, and he came out and said, "Here's a song I wrote." And all of a sudden, this little light went off. It's a songwriter, because I guess I was, 14, somewhere around there, 15 maybe. And so I got a guitar, and then all of a sudden I got involved in folk music. Of course, at the time there was Peter, Paul, and Mary, then you discovered Dylan, then Woody Guthrie. And then, I got into the Cambridge guys, Paul Siebel and Eric Anderson, and then there was and I got a little folk group in high school with the two guys, Rick Fowler and Wayne Kidd. And there was a little notice on the bulletin board there that says, "Looking for entertainers to play at a ski resort in New Mexico." So we went and auditioned, and we got the gig. And so right out of high school, we got on a bus in Dallas, Texas, and then 28 hours later, we were in Cuesta, New Mexico, and the guy picked us up, and we went to this little barbecue joint. We sang at night and wrapped potatoes in tinfoil during the day and swept floors and washed dishes, but we really liked Red River. So we kept going back up there during the summer, and we opened a little folk club up there called the Outpost. And it was, we'd come back during the fall and go to college, or pretend like we went to college. And then but then there was the kind of a folk scene in Texas, down in Austin, with and Houston with Townes Van Zandt and a bunch of these other guys, Alan Dammer and Big Bill Moss, and it was a cool folk scene. So that's kind of how I ended up in New Mexico.
Now,
and in folk music and in music, in general, is how I got going.
Texas in the 1970s doesn't exactly strike me as the same cultural milieu as, San Francisco in the Summer of Love. I'd have to imagine it was a bit more buttoned up, a bit more conservative. What was it like to be playing, kind of counterculture music in Texas at that time?
Well, it was, it's kind of how I wrote Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother, because it was kind of a long-haired answer to, Fight Inside of Me and Okie from Muskogee, because, all of America was going through a very turbulent time back then with the Vietnam War, and, of course, civil rights and women's lib and counterculture and all that. So it was a turbulent time, and especially, if you had long hair, if you drove through West Texas, you'd put your hair up under a ball cap to get through there, because it was intense. And but there was a great music scene, especially in Austin, and so there was this, underground scene of very conscious people who actually had a conscience doing music at that time. But it was a very strange scene at that time. And
then you kind of rose out of that scene to more national prominence when Jerry Jeff Walker took that song that you just mentioned, Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother. How did you meet Jerry Jeff, and how did he find out about that song? How did it get recorded?
Oh, well, up in Red River, we had a little folk club up there, and it was a stopping off point for all the musicians from Austin going up to Colorado, and all the Colorado musicians going back, And so we had the little club, and so Jerry Jeff came through, and and just passed through, and it was really Jerry Jeff came into town, and everybody just went crazy, like, Jerry Jeff, he wrote Mr. Bojangle, he's a big star. Man, this is going to be so good for our town of Red River, And then after about 2 or 3 days, people would come up and they'd go, when's your friend going to leave? But Jerry was pretty wild back in those days. But we met and, just kind of hit it off. And then he got Redneck Mother I wrote the song. In Red River, there was like kind of a safe hippie bar, musician bar down at the end of town. And there was no, pretty hardcore, serious cowboy redneck bar. And we had a jam session one night, and it was my turn to go get the beer. So I said, well, how bad could it be? So I walked in the D bar, and I found out, and some kind of old woman started hassling me about my hair, and I got out with the beer and came back, and I said, guys, I almost got beat up getting this beer. And I think B.W. Stevenson said, well, did you get the beer? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, here, sing a song. So we just made up Redneck Mother then, and it was just kind of a goofy thing we'd sing. And then, but a guy named Bob Livingston was at the Hootenanny that night, and he left, went to L.A., played bass with Michael Murphy, and came to Austin, started playing bass with Jerry Jeff. And I think one night at the Broken Spoke Saloon, Jerry broke a string, and they didn't have roadies back in those days. They just and so Jerry said, Bob, sing a song. So Bob sang Redneck Mother, and all these old cowboys went, what the hell is that? But they started singing along. So then Jerry went to Lukenbach to make the Viva Talingba album. And so Livingston called me up and he said, Jerry wants to cut Redneck Mother. And I said, why? Because it was just a throwaway, And so he said, we need a second verse. I made up the second verse on the phone right at that time. And Jerry cut it. And up to that point, I'd been Ray Hubbard. But on the record, Bob Livingston goes, this song is by Ray Wylie Hubbard. So I got a middle name like everybody else in Texas at that time, Willis Allen Ramsey and, Jerry Jeff Walker and all these three-name guys. So that's how that kind of happened. It was nothing planned at all.
How did it change your personal and professional life?
Well, like I say, I got a middle name, and I was Ray Wylie Hubbard because the record that Jerry, that record came out, and that's still a definitive progressive country record, because that whole scene, like Michael Murphy was a folk singer, and he came to Austin. He had a guy named Leo LeBlanc started playing steel guitar with him, and Jerry Jeff was a folk singer, and he came down and put together this rock band with John Inman on guitar, and Willie, of course, was, a Nashville songwriter, and he came here and he got Mickey Roffield, who'd been playing blues harp. So the music really was progressive. You know what I mean? I mean, it really was, nobody was really doing it at that time, especially in kind of the whole folk rock country scene. And so it was pretty interesting time. It was a great scene.
Now, at that time, I've read a couple different things about you, so maybe you can clear this up. I've read in some instances that you always went the independent route, never signed to a major, and then I've also read that after Redneck Mother came out that you actually signed with a major with like Warner Brothers. So which is it? I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, we everybody was getting record deals down here. Rusty Weir, Fromholtz, and Ben Fromux, just all these bands were getting record, and we made a record. I got with another group of guitar players. These guys had Oklahoma guitar, bass, and drums, and we had a pretty bad attitude. We called ourselves the Cowboy Twinkies, just because I don't know why, we had a pretty punk attitude at the time. And so we went in the studio and we made this record, and we got offers from a bunch from Atlantic. We actually got an offer from Frank Zappa's Discreet Records at the time, and everybody loved the record. And we said, "Well, put it out." And they go, "Well, no, you did it on an 8-track, man. You need to go to Nashville and do it with solid state amps." And we could make it really. You'll sound like the Beatles with all the new technology in the '70s. And so we went to Nashville and we made the record. And then I think what happened, we were kind of a folk rock group in a way with Bad Attitude, as a matter of fact. But we made the record, and then we left, and I guess they took it to the record label, and they said, "Well, country radio is not going to play this," so they put steel guitar and girl singers on every track and tried to make it, I guess, radio friendly. And we heard it, and we just it broke our hearts, because it wasn't the record that we had made. Our record we'd made originally was kind of edgy and cool, and this one was just. There were 2 albums there. There was the album we made, and there's the album they made. And so to answer your question, yeah, we did have it was a major label, and it was a disaster for us, as a matter of fact. We had to wait out the contract. So I called up my lawyer and I said, "Man, look what they did to my record, man. I mean, what can I do?" And my lawyer said, "Well, I suggest you start drinking." Because there's nothing you can do.
And did you take that advice? Did you take that advice?
I did.
Okay.
I took that advice till I was 41 years old, and and I said, "No, I'm not going to do that anymore." But no, it was to answer your question. Yeah, we had the one record on a major at that time. I don't know when that was, 70 something, somewhere in there.
Gotcha. And in that time, in that milieu down there, when you had that deal, everyone was coming down and giving deals. Were you writing with other writers, or did you tend to write by yourself and bring it into sessions?
It was pretty much. I never did do a lot of co-writing. It was just, and I kind of look back on some of those, and they were kind of, half-assed attempts. I really hadn't learned the craft at all of songwriting. So, no, but to answer your question, they were just, there weren't, I don't think there were any co-writes. I hadn't really, I didn't do that. It just never came up at that time.
Yeah, I've in my personal, kind of artistic path, that's never kind of been my vibe either. I just kind of don't get how it works. I think some people can be really good with it, and, it can add up to more than the sum of its parts. But for me, writing something is so idiosyncratic. I have a really hard time working with somebody else.
Well, I want to look up that word after we hang up. But,
hey, man, I lived in Texas for 7 years, and they got that word down in Texas.
No, but, well, as I used to go, that thing, I think I heard Roger Miller one time say that writing a song is like an old cat having kittens. You just crawl off under the porch by yourself and do it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I did it for it. But now lately, I got clean and sober when I was 41, and I really wanted to try to be a real songwriter. So at 42, I started taking guitar lessons to learn how to finger pick, because the songwriters I really admired, the early Dylan stuff, he learned how to finger pick, and Gordon Lightfoot and Towns and all these cats. I needed to get that right. And so I took like I say, I got clean and sober, and I took guitar lessons and tried to learn the craft of writing and trying to, be better at it, or at least as good as I could. But then lately, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, Slade Cleaves called me up and said, "Hey, man, I got this. I'm stuck on this song. Would you want to get together and maybe write it with me?" And I was like, almost like not terrified, but just like really apprehensive, like, "Oh man, writing with another person." I'll put out a line and Slade will go, "That sucks," and I'll go, "Oh," and then I'll just crawl up into a ball,
right? That
feeling of whatever. But so I called up old Gerf Borlix and I said, "Man, Slade wants me to write a song with him," and I've never sat down and co-written with a song. What do I do? And Gerf said, "Well," he said, "Yesterday, Like a Rolling Stone, Memphis, Johnny Be Good, all those songs have been written. So you don't have to write those. All you have to do is, like, whatever Slade presents you write that."
Right.
And that really took some of the pressure off. Like, man, I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
that really made sense to me. So Slade came over and he said, "I got this song called Wishbone and Southern." I said, "Well," so we put them together and we wrote it, and that was kind of the first co-write that I did. And then lately it's been have done it a lot. I've written with Ronnie Dunn and wrote the song with Eric Church and with Tam Tillis, and just wrote one a couple of weeks ago on Zoom with Randy Rogers. And so it's kind of like almost like a song that maybe I wouldn't have written if I hadn't got with these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
In a way.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned because it's kind of I think it's crucial. Did you find when you got kind of clean and sober, you're in your 40s, you take these guitar lessons, you learn how to finger pick. Did you find that finger picking and learning how to do that opened up the palette of your songwriting?
Well, it did, because it's like at that. Then I'm at that. I still try. I want to keep learning new things. Like I learned to finger pick, and then I learned open tunings, and then I learned slide, and then I got a mandolin. And so by learning new things, that gives the song a door to come through that wasn't there before. Yep. You know what I mean? Like if I hadn't have learned open D tuning, I wouldn't have got Train Yard or Ask God or any of these songs I wrote in open D. So to answer your question, yeah, it completely. I think the first song I wrote after I learned fingerpicking was a song called "The Messenger." After I'd written, someone gave me a book called "Letters to a Young Poet" by Rilke, and there was a line in there about fear and what's on the other side of it. I think it's, to paraphrase, it's like our fears are guarding princesses, and we overcome that fear, and the dragon turns into a prince. I can't remember, but I paraphrase it to our fears are like dragons guarding our most precious treasures. And that's kind of what happened. I had this fear of embarrassment about calling up someone to teach me to fingerpick. Take guitar lessons at age 42. That's, ew. I don't even like talking about it now. But I overcame that fear of embarrassment, and then I wrote that song, because I had to acknowledge that line from Rilke because it meant so much to me. And then all of a sudden it validated it, overcame that fear, and there were these treasures on the other side of it. And so to answer your question, getting in, and I'm still trying to learn new things, which my wife said, that's all well as good as long as I don't try to learn to play banjo,
Fair enough.
She said, that's out the door. But you know what I mean? So to answer your question, it really, like I say, gave the song a door to come through that wasn't there before.
I get that. One thing that I tell, younger writers, if they ask me, what's the job of being a songwriter, I always kind of tell them, like, well, your job is to stay inspired. But if you kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, I think that the whole act of staying inspired is doing exactly what you're talking about, which is constantly and for the rest of your life, putting yourself in kind of uncomfortable situations where you're the worst person in the room. And that is how you stay inspired, because you learn something new. And you're right, it's freaking terrifying at the time.
It is, but now it's like I got comfortable with it. Like Eric Church called me up. He said, "Hey man, I want to write this song with you called Desperate Man." Mm-hmm. And so I was just being a smart ass, and so I said, well, one time I was so desperate I went to a fortune teller to get my future read, and she said I didn't have one. Just being a smart ass. So he goes, okay, that'll be the last verse. I went, whoa. And so I went up there and met with him. He said, I got this groove. It's really done. So we just talked about what a desperate man would do. Well, what have you done? Well, I went to the Joshua tree. I went, I fall down on my knees. I went to, and so it just fell into place. But it really, it's gotten to the point now, like I say, a couple of weeks ago, I just called up Randy Rogers. I said, hey man, I got this idea for a song. So we got on Zoom and spent about 40 minutes and we wrote this pretty cool song. And so it's just overcoming that fear. Now it validates the Rilke that these treasures are on the other side of it. And all of a sudden my friendship with Randy's, there's a bond there now. We're co-writers. You know what I mean?
No, totally.
And so it really, like I say, for an old cat, man, I'm really come back to being grateful.
Yeah. Take me back. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here because I want to know a little bit more about your story in that era. You know, you work for Warner Brothers. They've butchered your album. Your lawyer has told you to just go drink your way out of it. How did you get from that point? You know, since then, you've always put together this real independent operation, this independent music operation, both in its sound and in its business structure. How did you begin to start putting things together in the 80s, both music and business-wise?
Oh, gosh. Well, like I said, I got clean and sober in '87. All my other projects, like I tried to, you know, back in those days, in order to make a record, you have to had someone had to say yes. Right. You know, a record label. You know, you just couldn't go out and make a vinyl record. But we did some half-assed attempts. But any of the projects I did back kind of when in my 20s and 30s when I was, you know, drinking and all that stuff. I mean, I was always make a good living as a bar band. You know, I could always, you know, we'd always played the same places that Willie and Murphy played here in Texas, even without anything on the radio, because it was just a scene there, and I was a part of that scene. But when in '87, like I say, when I got clean and sober, I kind of had to rethink it, and like I say, by learning finger picking, I made this kind of commitment that I was going to write songs not to see what I could get from them, but to see what I could contribute. You know, and so for some reason I just said, yeah, I'm not going to write songs to try to get somebody to record them. I'm not going to write songs because I have a publishing deal of trying to give some publishing company 12 songs a year. I said I was just going to write songs that would hopefully contribute, where someone would groove and maybe dance to the groove, or they'd hear a line like the Messenger line about Rilke, or where they'd, you know, like Snake Farm, where they'd smile, you know. But somehow by doing that, I've gotten a lot of, you know, from doing that. But I made that commitment, and so. But then, to get back to your question, is you know, CDs came in around that time, right? Right. You know, and so I said, well, I need to do a CD, and I didn't know anything because I hadn't done any recording at all for like 8-9 years. You know, I hadn't done anything. I just kind of played in bars, and that was about it. But I said I need to do a CD, so I had a friend of mine that had the old studio there in Garland that Willie Nelson cut, Red-Headed Stranger. It was like a 8-track. I think it was 8-track at the time. I think they sold the 16-track. So I went in there and started cutting these songs. And this is, I'll tell you this real quick. So anyhow, well, what I do, so there's a brochure there said, like, Blue Ridge CD pressing. Mm-hmm. So I said, oh, okay. So I called up there in Nashville, and I said, and they hear this, you know, say, yeah, this is Louie. And I said, well, Louie, I said, I want to get a CD. And he said, well, here, I'll send you the information, some CDs. So he sent me some CDs he had done of bluegrass bands and everything. And it says, get it mastered and camera-ready artwork. So I said, okay, I can do that. So we went to Nashville to get it mastered. I looked at all the albums, and all record albums were mastered either Georgetown Mastering or Master Phonics. And I said, I really want this to sound great. So we went up there to Nashville, my guitar player, Terry Ware and I, right? So we go to Georgetown Master. We master it. We go over to Blue Ridge CD pressing. We walk in, and there's a lady there. And I said, well, I've got my camera-ready artwork, and I've got my mastering CD. I've got an appointment with Louie to do my CD. He says, okay. So she brings me back. So we go back in this little room. There's this guy back there, and he's got on these beard aviator sunglasses and a starched Western shirt on and a bolo tie and these really starched jeans with ostrich cowboy boots. And he stands up and he reaches out his hand and goes, Ray, glad you're here. And I shake his hand, and all of a sudden he goes, is someone with you? And I go, yeah, I'm a guitar player here. Are you blind? And he goes, yes, as a matter of fact, I am. So I sat down there, and he, of course, I guess he's got a Braille typewriter. And so he said, well, give me your CD and give me your artwork. And all of a sudden the thoughts run into my head like, thanks, God. What kind of deal is this? I've spent 8 years. I come out of this honky-tonk fog. I get clean and sober. I'm trying to do my best. I do this record, and I'm giving my artwork to a blind guy. And I'm just going, Oh God! So he types out this thing and he says, "Okay, I need $1,000, deposit." So I give him $1,000. So we're driving back, right?
Yeah.
And my guitar player Terry and I, and we're driving back from Nashville. We're both just like in a daze. Like, this is so strange. So we're drive. We drive about an hour out of Nashville heading back, and we hadn't said a word. And all of a sudden, Terry looks at me and he goes, "For a blind guy, he dressed pretty good." And it just it made sense, like, oh, yeah, okay, and like, yeah, he looked sharp. Okay, so anyhow, we got the CD and it sounded great, looked great at the time, but it was definitely.
Yeah.
I still look back at that going, "Oh my God!"
No, definitely.
But anyhow, then, yeah, it was just like, what kind of deal is this, And so anyhow, we put that record out, and then there was a little label in San Marcos. Somehow, I kind of put that record out to let people know I wasn't dead or drunk,
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was writing songs, and then I met Judy and my wife, and we got married. And so she said she kind of started getting into the business of music and learning about publishing. She said, "You need to have your own publishing company." And so she got into that. And then I did there was a label out of San Marcos called Digidisc. And at that time there was another label in San Antonio that was doing kind of these country guys. And they offered me $15,000 to do an album. Went great. Well, Digidisc, they said, "Well, we can give you $4,000." But Digidisc had Michael Hall and Lisa Medlick and Michael Fracasso, and they had these writers that I'd rather be associated with those guys than the other guys. So I took the Digidisc deal, just because I wanted to be, like I say, Michael Fracasso and Lisa Mednick and those were the writers I wanted to be with, to be like. And so I turned down the other deal, and we did Digidisc. And so we did Loco Gringo's Lament, which I really think was the first record that I ever did that didn't have excuses duct taped to it. It was a record I could hand to someone and go, "Here it is. This is the record that I wanted to do." And it's because all the other ones I had, they all had excuses like, "Well, we mixed everything in 11 hours, or we ran out of money." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Loco Gringos was my first real record that I could say, "Yeah, here it is."
What did that feel
and
like
then,
to achieve that?
Well, it was really gratifying in a way, because it was, I had songwriters that I really respected tell me they had dug the record, and that was really, a guy like Kevin Welch came up and said, "Man, that, Messenger Line, man, that was great," and then some, or LaFave or somebody would just come up and say, "Hey, man, I dug that," and then at that point, when that record came out, I was able to open shows for Guy Clark as a solo, and then I did a songwriter tour with Kevin Welch and Jimmy LaFave, and then did a song swap with Lucinda Williams. You know what I mean? So I was in the same ballpark,
Yes, totally.
and so it really validated it in a way to say, "Hey, man, I'm a real songwriter now."
And it sounds like your decision to forego the more money from a different label that would have put you in a different scene. It sounds like that was worth it many times over, because you got to hit the mark of where you wanted to be.
Well, yeah, Joe, it really was, and it's one of those things too that ever since Loco Gringos, I've been able to do the record exactly the way I wanted it. I worked with Lloyd Maines and Garth Moritz and George Reap as producers and co-producers, and I learned so much from them. But it was the record that that nobody was telling me how to do it or what to do it or anything like that. It was just like, okay, this is the record I want to make. And so, that was really important. It's still important to me.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's really two acts then in your creative career, and it sounds like that is the beginning of Act 2 for you.
I would think so. Like I say, that's the first real record that I feel like was the really Loco Green was the record that I say, okay, here it is. Take it or leave it. That's the best I can do, and it's and I like it.
When Ray got sober and his creative life began its second act, he found great inspiration from Rainer Maria Rilke's iconic work, Letters to a Young Poet. That is a book that's mandatory reading for anybody considering pursuing a creative life. I'd like to read you a pair of quotes from it. The first deals with the necessity of solitude in the creative pursuit. He writes, "Therefore, dear sir, love your solitude and try to sing out with the pain it causes you. For those who are near you are far away, and this shows that the space around you is beginning to grow vast. Be happy about your growth, in which, of course, you can't take anyone with you. And be gentle with those who stay behind. Be confident and calm in front of them, and don't torment them with your doubts, and don't frighten them with your faith or joy, which they wouldn't be able to comprehend. Seek out some simple and true feeling of what you have in common with them, which doesn't necessarily have to alter when you yourself change again and again. When you see them, love life in a form that is not your own, and be indulgent toward those who are growing old, who are afraid of the aloneness that you trust. And don't expect any understanding, but believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love there is a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without having to step outside of it." And now I'll read you a second quote. This is the quote that brought me to the book in the first place. I actually read it in a piece of bathroom graffiti at the Cheatham Street Warehouse in San Marcos, Texas, and I remember thinking to myself that it was the most elegant bathroom graffiti I'd ever read. And this is the same quote that Ray just referenced in our conversation, and that bathroom is only a couple miles away from where he lives. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to how it got there. I won't say it's beyond a reasonable doubt, but there certainly is a preponderance of evidence. Anyway, here's the Rilke quote that changed Ray's life, and which could change yours too if you let it. "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love." Talk to me a little bit about, we might be entering Act 3 here because you signed to Big Machine Records. You have this album coming out right now entitled Co-Starring that it is just a murderer's row of people that have recorded with you on this album. Talk to me a little about how this deal with Big Machine came together, then how this star-studded record came together and what the process was like.
Well, the record came together first. I had already made the record. It was, I guess, I started about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I'd called up this band Cadillac 3. They called me up and said, "Hey man, we dig your stuff. You want to open some shows for us in Texas?" And I said, "Yeah." So I met those guys, and we just kind of hit it off. And so I had this really kind of funky song called Fast Left Hand. So I called them up and said, "Hey man, would you guys want to track this with me?" So they said, sure. So I went up to Nashville and went in a studio that they knew. And I said, here's the song. And they just played it. And then I ran into a young fellow named Tyler Bryant. And we just hit it off. And I said, hey, man, I've kind of got this rock song that, I'd like to write with you. So we went up there and we recorded in his basement, just recorded it live. And then this other kid, Aaron Lee Tashian, he'd opened some shows for me there in Nashville, and I just liked him. And I had this other thing, Rock Gods, and I said, hey, man, do you think your band would want to track this? And so they said, sure. So I kind of come up with this deal, and then really strange, I met Ringo Starr about 6 years ago in L.A., and we were playing at McCabe's out there, and this guy comes up and says, my name's Brent Carpenter, and last time you hear, I got your album Snake Farm, and I burnt a copy for Ringo, and he's playing the Greek Theater, and he wants to meet you. So Rick Richards and I went out there and met Ringo backstage and everything, and he was just, it was really strange too, because I was just traveling with Rick Richards, being a drummer, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of that Tony Joe White thing. And so Ringo, and he said, where's your band? I said, well, it's just me and a drummer. And he goes, just you and a drummer? And I go, yeah. So he started introducing me to all these movie star stuff. He says, this is Wylie Hubbard. He's from Texas. Says, he's brilliant. He doesn't travel with the bass player. He travels with the drummer. He doesn't travel with the guitar player. He travels with the drummer. Just him and it was really, he just really went on about that. And he said, come out and sing Help My Friends with you at the end of it. So we went out, and we just kind of stayed in touch. And then 2 years ago, like I say, in Santa Fe, where he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm making this record. So, well, you need a drummer, let me know. And I thought he was just kind of kidding. But then I wrote this song called Bad Trick. Actually, it's a co-write with my wife. I had a really bad gig. Sound was awful. The promoter was kind of chicky, and there was a difference in the head count. So I came back. I got back about 3 a.m. My wife, she goes, how was the gig? And I go, man, it was a rough gig. She goes, well, everybody turns a bad trick every now and then. And so we wrote the song, first song we'd ever written together. We've been married 30 years. Yeah. And so I had the song, so I sent it to Bruce Sugar, Ringo's engineer, and I said, hey, man, be serious about this. Here it is. So then I sent it to Brent Carpenter rather than Bruce. I'm sorry, at the time. And so then I get this text from Ringo. It says, be in the L.A. next week at 2:00, and I'll play drums on the track. So this was about a year ago. So I flew out there and went to his house. He has this incredible little studio at his house, and just a drum room and an engineering room. And he played drums on the track. And he said, are you going to get to play bass? And I said, well, I don't really know. I haven't thought that much. He said, how about Don Was? And I said, well, I don't know him. He said, I'll ask him. He said, who's going to play guitar? And I said, and he said, how about my brother-in-law? And I went, well, yeah, sure. So because of Ringo, I got Don Was and Joe Walsh on it. And then I ran into Chris Robinson here in Austin. And I said, hey, man, will you sing on this? He said, sure. So I sent it to him, and he was in some rock club in Dusseldorf and sang on it. And so it just all came together. So, okay, so really quick. So anyhow, then I get Pam Tillis. I said, hey, man, will you sing on this? And so she said, sure. So I had the album done. It was done. It was mixed and everything. And we came to Nashville. My son, Lucas, who plays guitar with me, also works for Gibson. So we did the big Gibson NAMM thing up there. Yeah. And there was, with a whole bunch of guitar players. So there was a guy named Julian Raymond kind of running around backstage, and he was kind of coordinating everything. They said, hey, so what are you doing, man? He said, I've been a fan of your music for a while. And I said, well, I just made this record with a bunch of these people. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, I got a track with a beetle, an eagle, a crow, and a was not was. And he went, huh? And he said, I'd like to hear that. So I said, yeah, sure. So I sent him a link. So he said, hey, man, he called me. And he said, hey, listen, I also work A&R for Big Machine, and I played that for Scott Bruchetta. He'd like to talk to you about doing a record deal. And so I said, well, okay. So Judy and I flew up there, and we met Scott, and Julian and everybody went in there. And he said, and Scott said, I really want to put this record out. And I said, well, man, why? I'm an old folk blues roots cat, man. And and so Scott said, I've been a fan of your music for a long, long time. Dangerous Spirits. He knew some of my songs, and he said, I'd really like to put this record out. And I said, and so Judy said, well, we'll lease it to you. And he said, okay. And so it's a lease deal, which is pretty cool because we still own the masters. And I said, man, I said, really? I said, I don't sell a lot of records. And Scott said, well, we'll see if we can remedy that. Man. And so we looked at the deal with lawyers. The lawyer said, it's a heck of a deal. It's a lease thing, and we'd already made the record, and paid for it. So there was no advance. There's no recoupable for the cost of the album. So right off the bat, it's
you're in the black.
Yeah, it really is. And then, cause then we made these videos for nothing. And, I guess right before this whole COVID thing started, I get this text, from Brent, and Ringo said, be out in LA next Thursday at 4:00 and we'll shoot a video for, Bad Trick. So I flew out there, and, Brent Carpenter, who does all Ringo's videos, we shot this little video with Ringo there in the deal. And then Brent used some footage from Joe and Don Was that he had. And then I called up Chris and I said, hey, man, you shoot a video, you singing the chorus. And so we put it to, Brent got it and put it all together. So, I did the same thing. And with Ashley McBride, I just went upstairs in my room and Judy shot it on iPhone and Ashley shot hers and put it together, And so... But it's I'm pretty amazed. I mean, I'm 73 and I got a record deal, and so far we're really. In fact, they're doing vinyl. I've got to go and sign vinyl here a little bit later today. But it's pretty. It's just I'm happy as I can be right now.
Man, it really seems like in some ways that this was the culmination of goodwill and people being fans of yours. All of this can be traced back to that decision to go with the more songwriter label that was going to pay you less, and also deciding that you were going to as you so eloquently put it, not see what you could get from a song, but see what you could contribute to a song. This seems like the fruit that's growing off of that tree there.
Well, I think so, Joe. I mean, I tell people this too, that I sleep with the president of my publishing company, which is Judy. She went in there. She was in the car business. And she, she was a door girl at Mother Blues back when she was 16. She ran away from home and did all that stuff. And then she was in the used car. But then she really got in there and studied publishing and licensing and all that. And that's a really good place for me as a writer because, like I say, I'm not writing for anybody else. I'm not trying to get cuts, in Nashville deal, or I'm not writing for a publishing company drawing a salary where I got to give them so many songs. I'm just, damn, there's the Snake Farm. I'll write about that. Or I'll write a song about Mississippi John Hurt. Why not? Yeah, okay. And so, that as a writer, that's a really good place for me to be because I have this freedom to write about anything, and I've written songs about Charlie Musselwhite and Jesse May Hemphill and Spider Snake and Little Son and you know what I mean? And so, like I say, I'm very, very grateful that I can write a song like Bad Trick and all of a sudden got an incredible band
right
play on it, So I'm doing something right.
I'd say so. I'd say many things. But,
well, just hang around. I'll probably mess it up somehow.
Along your journey, along the way, as you've had fellow travelers and other writers around you, who were some of the songwriters on your journey that you looked up to the most, that you wanted to emulate the most, that you could take the most away from?
Well, Matt, I feel very fortunate, man, to have seen Lightning Hopkins and Mance Lipscomb and and these guys. But I also saw Ernest Tubb and Gary Stewart, and I saw those guys. And then coming up as a songwriter, of course, Michael Murphy was the guy who really was inspirational at the very beginning. And as a songwriter, I mean, he had all those incredible songs, 5 O'Clock in the Texas Morning, Drunken Lady, Wildfire, all those. And so Michael was a great influence in just the quality of his songs. But then also, I ran in Texas at the time. Of course, you can't not mention, Townes Van Zandt or Guy Clark or Billy Joe Shaver. Those writers, those are kind of the big three. That's kind of the holy trinity here, of Guy and Townes and Billy Joe. I think that's the bar that any songwriters has to aspire to. I don't think anybody will ever surpass them as writers, but that to have that as your bar to try to write with that quality. And so I, like I say, to have seen those guys and do shows with them, and but then of course there's always, Willie, who's an incredible songwriter, and all these guys. But then all the old. So there's so many. I couldn't just pick just one.
Yeah,
I feel very fortunate to have seen these cats too.
I in that time I lived down in Texas for about 7 years. I really got a sense of like it's something almost beyond pride in Texas music, that you have these guys who are very masculine guys that are into writing poetry, like this cowboy poetry almost. And I haven't found too many other scenes around the United States that have such a local authority and local pride in them, the way that I did down in Texas.
Well, it's a thing too. You say there's, but the thing too is you write a song, and all of a sudden, it's kind of, you can't have really a big ego. You can have self-confidence as a songwriter, but you can't have a big ego, because also you write a song, you go, man, this is great, and all of a sudden you go in a club, there's McMurtry, you go, oh, or Hayes, or you know what I mean? And so you're going, oh, okay, this song is good, but and so it's being here kind of deflates your ego a little bit, because there's so many great songwriters.
I know,
but you do have a self-confidence about it. You get to, I think, to a point where that I think when I did a song swap with Lucinda and Steve Earle, and that really was that's back when when Local Gringos was just coming out. And then Guy Clark called me and said, this is long. He said, will you open this show for me in Fort Worth? And that's a validation that that you don't get cocky about it, but you go, yeah, okay, it's a validation of, okay, hey man, these guys think must think I write a pretty good song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that was important to me.
Indeed, yeah, it's a real embarrassment of riches down there. I realized I maybe took it for granted that I could go see McMurtry at midnight every Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen where I'm living now.
Yeah, well, it's the thing too. It's like when you go see McMurtry, somebody said, "Well, I saw McMurtry the other night." You don't ask, "Was he any good?" Because he's great. You guess, "Was he loud?" Yeah. Oh yeah, he's loud.
So,
he's great. Yeah.
So once, God willing, this COVID thing dies down and live entertainment can happen again, are you going to hit the road again behind this album? Do you like hitting the road? Do you like touring, or do you like kind of just making the records and staying at home in Texas?
Well, no, it's still a joy for me. I got my son playing guitar with me. He's 26 now, and he's a really good guitar player. He's been playing with me since he's about 15 or 16, and he's a really good player because he's been influenced by some of these Texas guys like Gerf Morlix and Derek O'Brien and Stephen Bruton and and Charlie Sexton, guys like that. So he has his tone and taste down, because those guys have such great tone, and they play with taste. So it's a joy to travel with him, because he's a stand-up guy for a kid, and I got a great drummer, just Kyle Snyder. We just go out as a trio, and so it's still a joy for me. So hopefully, they'll come up with some sort of it'll die out, level off, or they'll come up with a serum, not a serum. What's the other word I'm looking for?
A vaccine, yeah.
Vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
so are you telling me that idiosyncratic and vaccine haven't made it down to Texas yet, his words, huh?
Yeah. But, yeah, so hopefully, it's still a joy for me, And so, hopefully this thing, we'll get back out on the road.
I travel.
We're not going to fly, but, we'll try. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I travel with my father ever since he retired. He comes out on the road and sells merchandise with me, so it's a family affair, and I love touring with family. It makes it, touring with family makes it totally different on the road, man. I can't recommend it enough to people that I know.
Well, I tell you what, it is a joy, like I say, having Lucas. I mean, plus he's a good player, and he takes care of me on the road, and it is a family thing. Like I say, with Judy, I tell people that, if it wasn't for Judy, I'd have everything I own in a shoebox and be looking for a happy hour gig, Yeah. Because she's really has learned the business, learned about licensing, and that's what you mentioned, talking about young songwriters. So a lot of young songwriters ask me for advice, and one of the first things I say, well, don't just listen to The Ghost of Tom Joad, read The Grapes of Wrath. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because see where Springsteen got that. Plus and so my whole deal is about reading. I still read everything. I just don't get sucked into the news. I'm still just, so I think that's very important. And my wife Judy, she's been very instrumental in helping some of these young cats here in Texas learn about licensing and the mechanics and all that of it, and publishing. And she's kind of talked to a few of these cats. Well, here's what you need to do: set up your own publishing company. Do that, So. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, but to get back to it, it is a family thing, and I feel very, very fortunate that that it is.
Every artist needs someone in their life who can facilitate the business end of it, because otherwise you do end up with a shoebox, everything you own in a shoebox, asking for a happy hour gig. Everyone needs someone to look after that for them, and hopefully it's someone that has their best interests in mind.
It really is. Like I've tried to learn the publishing and everything, and I know enough about it. But it's as they say, it's the music business. It's show business, and I don't like the business part. I like making CDs. I don't like selling them. Right. I like making records. I don't like selling them because that's just a different. I enjoy going out there and signing them at the merch table and everything, but the business end of doing it, but it's got to be done, Right.
Well, basically, you don't like having to put a bunch of backup singers and what else did they put on that first record?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have to want to do that.
Well, Ray Wylie Hubbard, I know you're busy with the press for this upcoming record, so I'm going to let you go. Thanks so much for taking time for our plucky little podcast here.
Oh man, well Joe, I enjoyed it. And like I say, you've got the number, and after this is over, if you're coming, after this thing is over, if you're coming this way, please let me know. Stay in touch with me. Anything I can do, don't hesitate to call.
Thanks, Ray. I sure will. Peace.
All right, take care, brother.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for being here. It was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Ray Wylie's latest album is entitled Co-Starring, out on Big Machine Records today, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.